As millennial, Brittany is queen, regardless of whether she's been in the news, which she may or may not have been recently, icon forever. Hey y'all, welcome back from lunch. I have never interacted with so many effortlessly cool people, even if some of you seem to have been very stressed out by the mood board. Who was like very stressed out by the outfit planning? Yeah, okay, some of you. I couldn't tell because like fantastic, everybody looks fantastic. My name is Kelsey Noonan. I'm the Director of Program Strategy at Pivotal, a group of organizations created by Melinda French Gates to advance social progress for women and young people in the US and around the world. I am so excited to be up on stage with this group of luminous humans who are all part of the Oops, AI Did It Again funding challenge. And I'm going to start by passing it to each of you to introduce yourselves and your work.
My name is Lauren Buita. I'm the founder and CEO of an organization called Girls Security. Just briefly, I started my background in national security in my early 20s and saw a lot of things that I thought should be different. And then I spent about a decade working on civil rights in the city of Chicago. I founded Girls Security to develop new approaches to how we think about security and technology, centering the lived experiences of girls, young women, and gender minority youth.
Hi everyone, my name is Neha Shukla and I'm so excited to be here. I'm 21 years old and the founder of Innovation for Everyone. We're a global youth-led AI ethics literacy movement. Thank you, Lauren, for the plug. I'm also an author of this book, which is available at the little stacks over there in the back. But our focus is really bringing youth voices to decision-making spaces and making sure that the young people most impacted by AI harms have the tools and the skill sets to navigate those harms. And so we're working within K through 12, after school, museums, and grassroots communities to make sure that we're equipping young people with the skills to think critically and kind of reimagine this future of tech to be something very different than the landscape that we're in right now. So really excited for this conversation.
Hi everyone, Cheyenne Sky Branscombe. I am a member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation tribe. I'm actually a last-minute fill-in. Your main innovator, Tasia, is in tech. Could not be here. She unfortunately has COVID. But we both work for ACES, the Advancing Indigenous Science and Engineering Society. In my defense, we just changed the name, so I am still learning that mouthful of an acronym. But I really focus within the PK-12 space, so our students, our littles, and making sure that we are designing programs that suit their needs within Indian country. So looking within their tribes, looking within their culture, and making sure that they feel seen, they feel represented, because that's the only way that we're going to get them interested in STEM.
Thank you so much. And because this is an intergenerational audience and we are all kind of tech-savvy humans, I want to ask you to try and describe what you do in the words of your parent or grandparent or an elder in your family. And I can speak for myself. My parents, they kind of understand what philanthropy is, but understanding that a Zoom meeting is work is a step too far. So I was recently taking care of my dad during a health event. I stepped out of the room and I heard him describe to the care team, oh, that's my daughter. She finds people online to talk to. And then sometimes she has an Oprah moment where she says look in your email, and she gives them her boss's money. So, honestly, not a bad gig. Would apply if that were out there as a job posting. So Lauren, what is it that your family thinks you do?
Oh my gosh, I don't even want to know. But my mom actually told me the other day, she goes, Lauren, you know what, AI is gonna be really big. I was like, note to self. No, I actually texted my dad when I was here and I said, what do you think I do? And he just sent me a GIF that just said magic. And then he wrote, I think you're a caregiver. That's sort of what he described. So I hope that accurately describes it.
I would be so proud of that description. That's really
adorable.
Wonderful.
I love that. My grandpa has Parkinson's, and so he forgets a lot of things, but he's yeah, beta, you just do computers, it's amazing. He forgets so many things, but he'll always remember oh my gosh, is your paper coming out? Or tell me, the mechanics of this thing. So I think there's a sense of excitement about it. And they know, they're okay, AI, that's something. And yeah, you do AI. And I'm yeah.
It's a word we've all heard.
It's a word,
it's a word. Cheyenne?
She warned me about this icebreaker over lunch, and I said I was going to lie because I didn't want to give the real answer, but going last, now I feel good. So my mom would say that she travels a lot, she talks to people, She has a lot of weird, maybe toys, maybe not toys, like they're computer chips. She carries around like these weird little cards that she has people like tap their phone. And I don't know how she pays her bills or really why she has a house because she's never home. Beyond that, she probably couldn't even tell you my title.
That's great. I love that, but also each of them recognize something very you about that work and kind of caring for others or sharing information or being a connector and spreading information. But I like asking that question because as we're talking about the next generation and AI, we are, as adults, to this next generation, the ones above us. Like, we're like, AI, kids, what do you think? I know it's got something to do with the internets. So I think it's important to stay grounded in what we do know and also recognize that this is a space that's moving really, really fast. And as we know, AI is not neutral. It is developed by specific people and players for an end goal, and depending on who is involved in the design of those products, the outcomes can look very different. So I want to start with the title of our panel. For each of you, how do the young people in your communities feel like AI is destiny, and how do you help them see it as a series of design choices? And I'll start with you, Lauren.
Speaking of old, at my age, you get something called brain fog. So if I don't write things down, I just start to think and my thought disappears out of my brain. So I think girl security sort of starts from this premise that girls and young people especially live in a constant state of being told what to fear without actually being secured from anything. So we really try to start from a place of humility, which is that girls have lived intelligence that we think can inform new ways of designing technologies. And so we start with sort of a rubric that is identity and trauma-centered, starting with the sense of self. So we sort of have them audit a technology that feels proximate to how they engage with technology. Most recently, actually Ariel, who's here, was a judge as one of our cohorts, looked at Facetune, for example. And so a conversation that is about technology and sort of relationship to the self, we then sort of ratchet it up. So we provide a scaffold for them to how to think about community. Okay, how does AI impact your community? How does AI impact the nation? How is it impacting the world? And so a conversation that starts out as like mental health or privacy evolves into something that's really about how do you build infrastructure? What do incentive structures look like? What does power look like? And how can we actually change systems? And I think another part of this work too is consent. Voters, citizens have a consent relationship with their government. And so we try to localize consent, which young people know from relationship conversations. What does that consent relationship look like between you and a platform? Is it reciprocal? Is there transparency? Is your wellness being considered? And that really moves the conversation from, I think, fear to agency. And even with that Facetune example, girls in our program did this really rigorous audit over 12 weeks. And they came up with a very simple intervention, which was introduce a feature called reality check, which basically reminds the user that there is a degradation of self when they continue to alter their appearance. And so we take those insights and we bring those to the companies, and we've had great success in them factoring those things in. And so I think it is reminding them that these systems are not destined, that they have intelligence, that we just need to build better infrastructure to pick up as intelligence signals.
That's really exciting. I love that, Lauren. I think what we're seeing with the young people that we're working with, primarily in Title I areas or like rural areas or places where maybe the benefits of the technology hasn't necessarily reached, a sense of disillusionment and a little bit of despair because so much of the surrounding infrastructure around this technology is broken. Like, young people don't have third spaces in many places, and it feels like you go to public school and your teachers don't care about you. It's almost like a war of the system against you. And so in so many of those settings where there isn't adequate mental health care, we're looking at political polarization and no third spaces and no walkable cities and all these kinds of factors that are coming in together alongside the development of AI and the proliferation of it. It feels like an inevitable space to go to. Like, when you have no other option, when you feel like getting a good grade in school is the only way out of a certain system, you have to use ChatGPT. When you feel like there are no friends that could relate to you across race or across sexuality or across religion, maybe the AI companion is the only way out. And I think that paradigm of feeling so lost and hopeless is something that we need to work on reshaping. And that's a lot of the work that we're doing at Innovation for Everyone, is making sure that young people have those spaces and can connect, but also understand these technological harms at a deeper level, and how any product being free means that you are the product, and how can we start unpacking what does it mean to interact with an AI companion, and what does it do to erode your ability to connect as a human being, and what are the larger implications with things like disinformation and misinformation and deepfake gender violence, and looking at all the interactions of all these things. And I think young people in our conversations and when we host discussions and go to schools are so excited and so critical about this technology, and so much smarter than we give them credit for. And I think this is such a beautiful place to just keep giving power back to young people, because our lived experience matters so deeply, and we have so much to say about reshaping these systems and changing policy and working with companies and holding them accountable for so many of these harms. And especially looking at Gen Alpha, I think that's going to be a really, really interesting playground where all these factors are coming together. The younger kids that we're working with are interacting with AI companions upwards of 7 hours a day. When you ask them, oh, do you interact with AI tools? They'll say, oh no, just chat and replica. And so that's a genuine conversation about what is real and what isn't, and what is our understanding of the tools that we're interacting with. And maybe us as Gen Z, we've grown up in this almost middle phase of growing up alongside, of course, the internet and social media, and being immersed in this attention economy of having your worth judged all the time. But Gen Alpha is going to be growing up in a totally different world of Cocomelon, AI-generated slop. Genuinely, that is their only source of media. And I think we're going to start seeing this separation and class stratification, where it's there will be a thinking class and a prompting class, and we really need to start, unpacking those questions and making sure that it's not only the kids in the private schools with the fencing and the horse riding and all those things that have the access to the ability to think and the ability to connect at a human level, and that we all have the ability to not only do those things, but also be really critical and imaginative and creative, and think about how we can build this tech ecosystem that actually serves all of us.
I love you bringing the Gen Alpha experience into the room, and Cheyenne, I know that you can speak to that as well. And I also really appreciate some of the themes you brought in from this morning, which is that in many ways the natural community infrastructure around young people is eroding and has been eroding since COVID, at the same time that these technologies are accelerating. And so we are trying to combat both the speed with which technology is replacing some of the functions that used to be communal or relational, while seeing kind of cuts and destruction of those third spaces, of those natural places where they gather. Cheyenne, what does this look like in your community?
I like that you said we don't give them enough credit for how smart these kids are. Because I run a hackathon that usually the lowest I will go is 5th grade, and that's really because those 5th graders are at the event. But I had a group of 3rd graders that were going to be at this event, and I said, bring them, let's have them participate. And me and my team, we scaled our hackathon down, knowing that these 3rd graders were going to come. I got chewed out by a 3rd grader, and his buddies backed me up. He let me know that they were very unhappy, that they came ready for coding and doing block-based coding on the microbits. News to me, 3rd graders. So apologies, will not scaffold for you anymore. But the factors that you list that we see in those rural communities, those Title I communities, like Native nations, First Nations in Canada, have so many of those factors. And then we have this additional layer of, you're not going to find an Indigenous nation that hasn't been horrifically treated, just historically as well as ongoing, in so many different ways. And there is just layers of generational trauma and generational trauma that is continuing to build. And, you know, again, going back to like, we don't give them enough credit, I think also like that side as well, because sometimes we go into these communities and now the communities look great. Like maybe they're not tied, it could be a private school or these people are quite wealthy, but there's this layer of mistrust, you know, not trusting outsiders, even other Native peoples. So, you know, I identify my tribe, and when I go to another tribe, it's hit or miss on if I'm welcomed or not. And we don't give enough credit for how young that starts to impact them. One of the stories I always tell from my own experience growing up is my first memory of having a conversation with any adult about the census and what a census was with my mother, who told me, you never answer the door for the census taker, and when they send the thing out, you can mail it back, but you cannot tell the truth on it. You always lie. And her favorite lie that she encouraged everyone to do if they were Native, not everyone, I guess I should say, it was suddenly your household had like 8 people. No matter if it was just me and my mom, there were 8 of us. She had 7 kids because we wanted to be a larger presence. And we, again, didn't want the accurate information. You know, unfortunately, there's just so much of, you know, what are they going to do with that information? And I continue to have reactions that I have to then, like, turn that logic part of my brain on, even as an adult, and go, wait a minute, like, why am I suspicious of, like, this awesome, you know, researcher that's coming in and doing this? Like, what am I doing? And that starts very young. And we see that already when we go into these communities and we start talking about AI. You know, they know it. They may not always recognize it, but they don't feel it's for them, and they're suspicious of it. As young as we've had conversations so far, we've seen that suspicion. Or at the very least seen almost like a sadness in that it's not for them, it's for someone else.
I think that census example is actually really relevant here because historically marginalized populations and historically harmed populations tend to be the first harmed in any new system, and have found creative and adaptive ways to kind of push back and hack those larger systems. A lot of the time when we talk about new technology, being slow to adopt it is seen as a problem. How would you reframe that in your community of kind of that caution, that distrust as maybe an asset?
Ooh, I'm going first now. She's putting me right on there. First I always just start very basic, right? And I'm not even talking about with the littles. Frequently people will hear me say, the most anxious people that I work with are my adult educators. Nobody is more anxious than a teacher when I bring new tech into their classroom. And it does not need to be AI to scare them. It can just be anything new, and it is scary. So I always try to go back to building blocks. Like, let's just first play with this. Like, let's see what we're seeing. Let's see how maybe we can make this work for us. But then let's see, you know, the next level, right, is how can this become ours? Because it's not feeling like it's for us. It's not feeling like it's made for us. The only way to change those things are to start and learn them. You know, luckily I have a ton of educators that, as long as I hold their hand, they're embracing this. You know, then kind of the next layers of our programming is targeting the entire community, because we know that the pathways through educators are successful. We know the pathways through students are successful, but that's not going to be the full picture, and it's not going to solve all the issues. And so a lot of our programming for, especially within my programs the next year or so, will be really trying to bring in the parents, the grandparents, the aunties. I've told teachers, like, hey, when we have these programs, when we have these trainings, like, it doesn't need to be, don't feel like you need to just bring the STEM teachers, like, bring the art teacher. If there is a parent that's really involved, bring them. Like, I don't care if the whole PTO comes up. Like, let's come hang out and play with all this tech that's stressing everybody out, and really just making it feel like, you know, I am bringing it for them, and I want them to, like, grab it and run with it. And we'll see.
And Neha, I feel like that's very relevant to your work because, I mean, your thesis is innovation is for everyone. And a lot of times you're seeing these young people be first to innovate with these new products. How do you get them to think critically about whether those products are working for them or against them?
It's a really great question. And I think the name Innovation for Everyone kind of has two meanings. Initially, a lot of the work was focused, and it was born out of like being 15, growing up in a small farm town, seeing my community totally decimated by the pandemic from people who didn't necessarily believe in vaccination or wearing masks or things like that, and you know, building a device to keep my community safe, and then overnight, like being in the New York Times and being skyrocketed into these boardrooms and these decision-making spaces, and so
a casual place to be as a teenager.
Crazy, so just like a completely different world, and I think from that experience, part of it was how can we equip young people with the skills to build technology to solve problems in their communities from the ground up. But what I saw in those boardrooms was that companies, time and time again, were prioritizing profit over the well-being of young people. So the dual meaning of the name is also making sure that innovation, whether it's AI or whether it's the next big thing, whether people are thinking it's the metaverse, no, it's not, or whatever else, like, can we make sure that those technologies are built safely for everyone? So I think that's kind of the double meaning there. But the question of kind of beating the hype, I think for us it's like we need to kill the inevitability narrative. AI is not inevitable. Marketing is inevitable. Companies' profits are inevitable, or at least they're trying to be. And so I think a lot of it is how can we make sure that young people have the critical awareness to understand what is true and what is beautiful marketing. And we're hearing so much messaging around taste and around you know, these startups and these companies framing things as a matter of like premium quality. But we have to really start disentangling like what is the trade-off that we're making when we trade efficiency for critical thought and diversity of thought, like let alone diversity of identity, but everything is becoming a variation of a variation. And so I think that's a big thing, but also showing young people that this like eventual erosion of agency and ceding your power to these AI tools, whether it is how do I break up with my boyfriend? How do I wish my friend happy birthday? How do I talk to my teacher? Like these are real queries that people are asking chatbots. Like what are the implicit risks associated with those? And how do you become so susceptible to control, whether it's by a company or by a government? And I think that is a lot of the conversation is like shifting from this top-down approach, because if we all lose agency to think and to communicate and to make decisions in the real world, and with the lack of therapy available, now people turning to AI companions at such alarming rates and, you know, widely unregulated technology, what are the larger implications there? And if, you know, a company is fine-tuning their models to be aligned in a certain way politically, or to miss out certain facts of history, or recreate history entirely and rewrite what is known to be true, I think then we start seeing some massive problems. And I think the example is like Claude was used for the bombing of the Iran girls' school that killed 157 girls. Like conversations around, okay, I'm using this tool, it's fun, it makes my homework easier, or like I don't have to do it at all. I don't have to, you know, answer these difficult questions with friends or do the messiness of what it means to be human. But what am I trading off in that regard? And what are the ways that my data is maybe fueling something I don't want to be part of.
So it's both talking to young people about the individual harm to themselves and kind of losing out on the critical thinking, but also the collective. And that is part of the process that you run girls through in your program, Lauren. Can you talk us through what that looks like to go from the individual to the community audit layer?
Yeah, I think so many of the girls and youth in our program have experienced risk or physical trauma by the time they enter our program. So I talk about this a lot. When you see a middle school student who's experienced the type of online trauma, like a deepfake notification, it is palpable in their physicality. It changed their physical composition. And to the point of young people not trusting systems, they don't trust systems because systems keep failing them. Yet at the same time, as adults, I'm putting that in air quotes, we feel as though we need to give credence to that trauma. We need to give value to that set of aptitudes that they've built. And many of the people on our team have experienced physical trauma. All of us have. So we do think you need to shift that narrative. So one of the ways that we do that is we take the capabilities that people use to prevent terrorist attacks and catastrophic events, and we train girls in our program using that same level of analytic rigor. So we combine design thinking, which is a very accessible pedagogical approach, with something called structured analytic techniques, which are used by intelligence analysts to predict harms. They're predictive in capability. And so as they go through the training, they do something called a pre-mortem. So they are actually able to surface risks in systems before they happen. And to the point about Claude, several months before that attack on the Iranian girls' school, girls in our program selected to audit the deployment of autonomous weapons systems in military command centers. And the first harm that they identified was harm to infrastructure impacting girls and women. And it's not rocket science. They've experienced that failure over and over and over again with what they do. But providing validation and saying that those experiences are signals. They're signals intelligence that industry can use, that policymakers can use, that people who design technologies can use. You can't prevent those harms. We are just not deploying the level of analytic rigor for technologies impacting youth that we are for technologies impacting the battlefield, and even there we've failed. And I often give this example because one of the experiences I had early on at Girl Security was, you're familiar with the Strava app, which is an app that tracks your running if one runs, which I do not, but if you did. And very early on, girls and women were flagging this for stalking for years. It wasn't until they realized that Strava was giving the location away of military service members that they actually changed the locational privacy settings. So we really feel very strongly that surfacing those insights sooner is something that can have an impact on a lot of different things. Insurers, general counsels, all of those sort of risk incentive structures we can change with their insights.
And I just want to take a beat for a moment on the fact that these girls predicted that the first strike in deploying AI in this way would harm girls. And remarkable that that came to pass, but that is happening in many less visible ways all of the time from our systems because they are not seeing marginalized communities in every light.
And all of these technologies are rooted in national security. Surveillance technology, the internet was developed by DARPA, and that facilitated all kinds of different harms. Surveillance technology started as spyware. AI technology started as deepfakes. And so there is a pattern to this. And someone whose work really inspires us, who's actually at UT Austin, is Dr. Valerie Hudson. She studies sort of global indicators of stability. And the first indicator out of 167 indicators that a nation is likely to become autocratic is the state of security for girls and women. So the less secure girls and women are, the more likely a country is to become autocratic. And so when we think about building digital infrastructure, we have to understand that it's not just an equity issue, it's a systems issue.
It's possible we're not on the good side of that curve right now, I would guess. All of you design with and for young people, but that is not the norm writ large. Rarely are young people consulted in the development of products, and even less often do they have real agency in shaping those products, and that goes back to some of the conversations we had this morning as well. Starting with you, Cheyenne, where have you seen the kind of design prowess and the real lived experience of young people shape a product or a technology in a meaningful way?
Yeah, and that's also maybe one of the selling points of AI, right? Is it's not fully baked, right? There's still time. When working with these communities, that probably is one of the biggest selling points, is it doesn't feel like it's too late. And in all of my programs, so what I really try to do is emphasize that I'm bringing this tech, I'm gonna teach you this tech, yes, building out curriculum, doing all these things, but they're tools, and then I want you to run with it, like I said, and that means I want you to make it your own, and really start to take that, right? And so we are seeing more students now start to use it in projects and use it in ways we hadn't thought before. What I really like, our students are gonna be getting access to this app that is another sort of machine learning app, but it really makes it to where it's much easier to train these models. And so, those third graders, although they would probably tell me they don't need the easier app, Cheyenne, they're gonna get that, and they're gonna be able to use it how they wanna use it and start training it how they want to train it. And that is really what I am desperately trying to bring to these communities, because if they don't see that they can shape it, they're not going to run with it. And so those tools, we had a student at our science fair recently. She took the microbit and actually used a harder method of doing a machine learning, because we didn't have access to this app yet. And she trained it to detect space junk, and doing all of that. And so again, that was not anything me or my team were thinking about when we designed this program. And she just ran with it and was able to build her model. And so started to feel like that was her own. And it's, there's this TikTok, or for my millennials, Instagram Reels, for my older folks, Facebook. So there's this one that I'm going to start using in presentations, where the company has announced that they're doing an AI integration, the new AI models here, and they're making all avatars for or headshots for the staff, and it pulls the first one up, and they're like, yeah, what do you think? And the person's Indian American, and he was like, it looks like it made me less Indian. And so then they tell the model, make him more Indian, and it puts a headdress on him. So not only went in the wrong Indian direction, but then also went in the offensive Indian direction. And so that it tells him, no, not Native American. And then it goes, oh, pilgrim. So then it makes him a pilgrim. And they say, no, not pilgrim. And then it goes, oh, make all of them a pilgrim. So at the end, all the staff have been turned into pilgrims. And, those are the perfect example of what, it feels like. And when we give them the actual models that they can train and build, they can make sure that their model doesn't look like that.
I love that. Neha, how would you answer that?
That's wild. Oh my gosh. I think a lot of it for us has been shifting away from tokenism and having really meaningful participation of young people in these decision-making spaces. When I was a teenager, I led the World Economic Forum's first ever entirely youth-led AI advisory body called the Generation AI Youth Council.
She's a slacker, y'all. I don't know if you can tell.
But what was so interesting is that in those spaces, we're working with policymakers, we're working with governments of EU countries, and even representatives from these corporate entities. And the amount of, while it was incredible and such an honor, it's hard. In those institutions, it is by default tokenism. It is by default. You go to places like the United Nations, and it is, you are there for a photo op, and you are there to shake a hand, and then they close the door and make the real decisions. And so it's so much about pushing against that. And I think what's really exciting, and part of our work, but also part of this larger responsible tech ecosystem, whether it's the Responsible Tech Youth Power Fund or Young Futures or all these incredible kind of collectives and groups and this big family that we have here, is that so much of it is we're trying to change the culture and make sure that young people aren't starry-eyed about this technology and are thinking critically, but that individual action has to move towards collective action. And how can we make youth power legible to these decision makers and really make sure we're driving meaningful change?
I cannot wait for companies to start to compete to get young people on the platforms by making it representative, making it exciting to be on there, and really incorporating their lived experience. I think that there's a future where that's possible. Maybe
just
not
have to
tomorrow.
push.
We
We
have
just
to
have to
push.
push.
We have to push. Lauren, where have you seen the input of a young person really affect the way that a product was shaped or designed?
Yeah, we see it all the time, to be quite honest, but I would say a couple of examples. I'm not going to name the company because I don't know, are we off record, but a company that had a large civil settlement as a result of privacy data breaches on a women's health app, had reached out to us. I think as part of that settlement, they had to give away money. And so we said, we don't want your money, but will you let us audit your technology system? And in that case, girls in our program identified, again, some really basic security features around personal data and privacy and locational settings that they did actually go back in and change the settings on the app. The same conversation is happening right now with ShotSpotter on the south side of Chicago, which is where we have one of our regional hubs. It's now called Sound Thinking. But again, young people in our community, they are living in that space. They know that community better, and they know what that community needs. And so they developed a proposal to create a community access app to just create a level of transparency around how data is being used and to be able to give live community feedback. And I think where we see the opportunity is young people want transparency. And technology companies are so afraid of litigation. They're so risk averse. And I think what we try to say, and what girls in our program keep bubbling up, is even law can be innovative. Even how we think about risk can be innovated. Everything doesn't need to be to curb some potential harm that may result as a result of any number of different things. And so that's where I see the real hope, is that they're finding these common themes within the ways that they audit these systems, and obviously with support from some of the adults, because I think it's important to understand that it's not their problem to solve, it's our problem to help steward the solutions and to sort of throw our bodies on the line. That's really how I see what we're supposed to be doing, our generation. But that they are finding these themes that are so much needed around reciprocity and transparency and responsibility and ethics as well.
I love that statement. It is our job to throw our bodies on the line and really create that scaffolding for what these young people are asking for. And sometimes that is as simple as transparency. I could continue this conversation as we have been with every panel. This could go all day. But I want to close us out really briefly with asking each of you. Many people are saying AI is too big, moving too fast for young people to really be able to influence. What would you say to those people? And we'll go really quickly down the line.
I would say that, oh gosh, I'm supposed to be fast. I guess I would say that these technologies are generalizable. And we know the communities we serve better than everybody. And we can forge better ways of carving a path for AI, but I think it is critical that the adults really take the hit and create that space for young people to have the sort of appropriate social and emotional way of auditing those systems, but to challenge the status quo, to question the defaults, and to understand that AI is not this isolated situation. We've got quantum encryption, we've got nanotechnology, we've got autonomous infrastructure. This is one technology on a long line of digital infrastructure. And this system is failing because the system it sits within are failing too. Insurance infrastructure, legal infrastructure, commercial infrastructure. So take that step back and understand how the nodes connect, and then call on the adults who are willing to put their bodies on the line, because we are there to be that front line as you do the work that you're doing to bring up the change that we believe is really important.
I think we've got some of those
throw my
adults in
body
the
on
room.
line for you.
Yeah.
Come on.
I love that.
Neha.
What I would say is that tech companies are outnumbered. There's like multiple-fold more there's millions of young people across the world ready to take action, and a very small number of entities that we're fighting up against. And so what I would say is we need mass awareness and education, and we need to be the galvanizing point for these young people to understand their role within the larger ecosystem and the ways that they can change individual behavior, but also work within communities. I mean, my hometown is fighting against a data center expansion, and we're seeing that grassroots fight all across the country. And we're seeing those little negotiations, whether abandoning a chat tool or kind of seeking human connection in the real world. And I will say, Tech companies are outnumbered, we're ready, and we're here to stay, and the fight is just beginning.
We can be the galvanizing point. I love that. Cheyenne.
So it's a yes and. I'm a big nerd. I like to nerd out, and I'm not afraid to nerd out with folks. And I would say in these conversations, not being afraid to nerd out and actually talk about AI, talk about these machine learning models, talk about them, because you can quickly explain that this is not Skynet that has just taken out and it's on, it's moving, it's doing its own thing. Right now, I think one of the best descriptions is we've got like this Grand Canyon with AI, right? So we've got this side where AI, like the tool is trained and ready. Like, say I'm an accountant, I could probably pop it into a model, and a lot of my work is reliably fed into that model. That's probably pretty secure, those like black and white data analytics. And then we've got this like valley. And on this other side of this canyon or valley, depending on how scared or disconnected you feel from AI, is that side we haven't reached yet that they can help shape, which is those gray areas, those therapy apps, those things that are not black and white, that you cannot just put in a cell of an Excel sheet. AI is not there yet. Again, it's not Skynet. We have not figured out how to reliably test these models. We are not seeing really great data that they're performing well. And so again, it's like, we're all right there. Whether you are a native girl on the res in rural, South Dakota, or you're, a wealthier white male that a lot of these models are trained off of, we're all kind of in this valley or Grand Canyon, and we all can shape and get to that. And so it's finding your place so that we can then shape those gray sides.
Climb together. Thank you so much for bringing your wisdom to this panel, and I'm so excited to see the work of everybody in the Oops AI cohort, because we desperately need you all to be shaping the way this next generation thinks about and uses AI, and that's going to really shape the future for all of us, including as adults. So thank you, and next in line.